Welcome, everyone. My name is Dan Nowicki. I serve as the Mission Center President for the Michigan Mission Center and Community of Christ. And this webinar session is being hosted by the Earth Stewardship team for the Mission Center to discuss a proposed resolution that would be up for consideration at the fall conference. November 4th is the business session in the mornings. So we thank you for coming. The session's recorded and we'll include that and materials for delegates to consider. I wanted to start this evening just by sharing about the Earth Stewardship team and then offering a reading of a hymn as a prayer to center our initial presentation. So the Earth Stewardship team in Michigan was formed by a Mission Center Conference resolution in 2013. The last resolve stating that a Michigan Earth Stewardship team be appointed annually by the Mission Center President for the purpose of gathering resources, collecting data, sharing recommendations, providing educational materials, and pursuing projects that support and encourage efforts to reduce consumption and implement sustainable practices in all Mission Center facilities and activities. And currently, Linda Stanbridge and Sarah Allen have been serving on the team along with myself, and for this resolution, we've included Winnie Johnston in our planning as the camping coordinator, since this focuses on our camping events. So we're looking forward to sharing with you tonight. We do have a pre-session poll we're going to do in just a moment, if we can find that in our meeting settings. So let me offer this prayer. It comes from Community of Christ Sings. It's number 147. Titled God of Creation, the words written by Naomi Russell, copyrighted by Community of Christ in 1980. I offer this as our centering point. God of creation, help us each to understand how to use the vast resources of both sea and land. Teach us how to plant and harvest, not for graft or greed, but that there may be sufficient for a world in need. God of creation, we would be creators too. Bless our efforts using wisely all that comes from you. Earth's stores of riches, like life-giving rain and sun, are your generous provisions meant for everyone. May we use them as intended, never wastefully, not just for this generation, but for those yet to be. God of creation, we would be creators too. Bless our efforts using wisely all that comes from you. Grant us direction as we seek for better ways to provide for our well-being and prolong our days. Field and forest, air and water, may we ever share as stewards in protecting, using them with care. God of creation, we would be creators too. Bless our efforts using wisely all that comes from you. Amen. Linda, are you able to launch the poll?
Okay, you should be seeing the poll now. Can somebody give a thumbs up if you guys can see it? It looks a little different on the host end. Awesome. Okay, great.
I guess the poll implies you've read the resolution. Is there anybody who needs us to read the resolution who hasn't seen it before registering?
It'd be nice just to have the refresher out there. It's been a couple weeks.
And we haven't seen it, Dan.
Okay. So we need to do that first then.
Would that be easier for me to do, Dan, since you don't have your laptop working?
Yeah, if you can screen share that or.
Sure, let me. I'm gonna go ahead and take down the poll. I'll just minimize it. I don't want to lose it forever. There. All right, I had like a million Word docs open on my screen. I didn't want to share the wrong item. Will it help if I make it a little bit bigger here and then in case you're a read along type person? Whereas Community of Christ upholds the enduring principles, sacredness of creation, and responsible choices. Whereas World Conference Resolution 1325 states that Community of Christ joins others in declaring a climate emergency and encourages mission centers to take responsibility for reducing carbon emissions resulting from church activities. And whereas multiple academic studies and United Nations reports indicate that plant-based diets require far less carbon to sustain than those including animal products. And whereas many popular menu items such as pizza, pasta, nachos, sandwiches, etc., can be offered easily without meat at reduced cost and lower carbon footprint. Therefore, be it resolved that menus for Michigan Mission Center events, such as camps, retreats, and other gatherings, be transitioned to offer primarily plant-based options with any meat, dairy, eggs, or other animal products included to be offered sparingly and from responsibly raised local sources, and resolved that the Earth Stewardship team provide resources to help educate and encourage congregations and individuals on how to transition menus and diets to be primarily plant-based.
Thank you, Linda. So now hopefully the poll is still there and we're asking just your initial level of support for the resolution as it is before we discuss and dialogue.
Okay, and can you see the poll results on your screen? Okay, awesome. I'll leave that up just for a minute so you can kind of glance and everybody take in where we're at. Okay, Dan, I saved those results for us too, so we'll be able to see where we were.
Okay. So now we're going to walk through the resolution, looking at each of the whereas paragraphs and the resolve paragraphs and provide a little bit more information. Starting with Linda, I believe. We've got some slides that'll come up on those.
Okay, are you seeing the cute little presentation that I made here? Perfect. So this is the whereas that we just read through, and then the presentation will take a look at each. So whereas Community of Christ upholds the enduring principles, sacredness of creation, and responsible choices, I would encourage you when you have time to look at each of them in their entirety, but here are a couple of bullet points that I wanted us to take some time just to look at together tonight. The enduring principles declare that we join with God as stewards of care and hope for all creation. And the enduring principles also remind us that we are called to make responsible choices within the circumstances of our lives that contribute to the purposes of God. And then the second whereas World Conference Resolution 1325 states that Community of Christ joins others in declaring a climate emergency and encourages mission centers to take responsibility for reducing carbon emissions resulting from church activities. I wanted to note the 2023 World Conference, so just earlier this spring, agreed that mission centers should take action to reduce carbon emissions at gatherings. So I think this is an important response, at least a starting point. And mission centers should seek to uphold what World Conference resolutions agree on. This is part of how we more fully live out who we are. And I think it's important that mission centers take that up as well. And then the next one I think is Dan. Can you read that from your screen, Dan? Oh, good, you're on a computer now. Okay, good.
Yes. So
Yeah.
this next screen asks or points out that studies and the United Nations reports indicate that plant-based diets require far less carbon to sustain than those including animal products. And we have several resources we can share later. But the basic idea is that eating more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, significantly lower impact because they don't go through an energy transfer to an animal. And so eating the item directly rather than inputting additional water, energy, and land greatly reduces the environmental impact. So the study cited here on the United Nations website said shifting from a mixed diet, including animal products, to a vegetarian diet, which does still include animal products, but only cheese or eggs, can reduce carbon footprint by up to 500 kilograms or up to 900 kilograms for a vegan diet, which would have no animal products at all. And so again, the United Nations has put several reports out. We also have other studies in scientific journals and regular media, documentaries, et cetera, that we can share for people to investigate the science of this. But I'd say the basic concept is eating the plant directly versus putting it through an animal agriculture process is what saves carbon and energy.
Whereas many popular menu items such as pizza, pasta, nachos, sandwiches, etc., can be offered easily without meat or at reduced cost and lower carbon footprint. Therefore, be it. So my bullet points here are pretty simple. Many of the meals that we already make at camps are already or could be meat-free. Accommodations, of course, are always made for special dietary needs of campers at camp, allergies or whatever. We've always made those accommodations and would continue to do so. I probably should have added that we have been corresponding with our camp directors, our youth camp directors, and our family camp directors for their input on this resolution.
So then, resolved that menus for Michigan Mission Center events, such as camps, retreats, and other gatherings, be transitioned to offer primarily plant-based options with any meat, dairy, eggs, or other animal products included to be offered sparingly and from responsibly raised local sources. And resolved that the Earth Stewardship team provide resources to help educate and encourage congregations and individuals on how to transition menus and diets to be primarily plant-based.
you want me to take the screen share down, Dan, or do you want to keep moving on to the menu part?
Yeah, you can take the screen share down for the moment.
We can chat. Okay.
So as we shared, we have lots of more information, such as a sample menu and articles and studies we can go into, but we wanted to pause here and just ask if there are any questions about the resolution, what it proposes, before we get into any discussion, just to clarify the language, what it means, anything anyone wants to ask. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, when they discussed the resolution at World Church, did they go into the specific ways to reduce carbon emission footprint, or did they just kind of leave that up to each of the mission centers and how the different ways that are available to decrease our footprint? I didn't get a chance to go, so I'm just curious.
From my recollection, there was no discussion of the specific ways. The resolution itself, we have in our packet, we can look at it, just says that every jurisdictional level of the church is encouraged to take responsibility for reducing carbon emissions resulting from church activities and encourage individuals to do the same. Consider the impact of climate change on the environment when reviewing policies and strategies. And then several things more about developing resources. There weren't specific measures left up to the jurisdictions to figure that out. So I'll just share briefly the document, which we can reference in specific questions that we will have available for delegates to review. It does have the full resolution, all of the church's enduring principles, that full World Conference resolution that we referenced, an article from a website called The Conversation, outlining the lower impact of a vegan diet and various variations between mixed meats, vegetarian, etc. An excerpt from the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change UN report 2022, discussing shift to sustainable healthy diets. A sample camp menu to show what this might look like as far as changes from our current practice to what this is suggesting over time. A couple pages of frequently asked questions with responses. Community of Christ scriptures from Doctrine and Covenants that address diet and earth stewardship items, and then a list of some additional resources, links, and articles. So that's what we have in our packet. But rather than just go through everything, we wanted to now open it up for this next hour to be questions and dialogue and ideas that you might have about the topic or the resolution.
I think it would be interesting to see some of the menus that you have there to,
Okay,
what does it look like?
thanks, Barb. Yeah, let's go there.
There's a couple more days on the next slide. So after you have a minute, I'll flip it over. But if you want to make it big enough to read, you couldn't fit it all on there. All right, do we need another minute with this one or are we good? Is everybody getting hungry now? Getting ideas for a midnight snack?
I'm still at work, so I don't even get to go home yet.
Oh no. Well, you can have somebody DoorDash you a grilled cheese with tomato soup. And don't forget the cookies and fruit. Well, hey, that's vegan, so you brought the right snack.
Got my apple, and when I get home, I've got some butternut squash, so.
That sounds darn good.
This might be a good spot to share. From Winnie's perspective, developing this menu, she took this from our current sample menu that's in our camping resources for directors for youth camps. And Winnie, in a moment, maybe you can talk to that, the changes you made, or how much of a shift this was. And I also share that we know of a Community of Christ reunion in another mission center that rents a Seventh-day Adventist facility, and their beliefs do not allow eating meat. And so renting that facility, we're not allowed to have that. And Linda's attended that and can share that we've successfully had Community of Christ family camps in a facility that didn't allow the use of meat in the week's menu.
I actually had Bill go through the menu with me. Any of you who know me know that I try to stay away from kitchens as much as I can. I always say if Bill dies first, I'll die shortly after from starvation, because he's the cook in our household. From the sample menu that's in the director's manual, we tried to kind of stay true to what that menu was. There were a couple of meals that we kind of nixed all together that were like a baked chicken based meal. We changed that one to the vegetable lasagna. Really not too many that, there was one that was hamburgers and hot dogs. Not that camps couldn't do something like that if they wanted to, but I think we changed that one to a nacho bar. But we tried to stay fairly true to what the menu was, but just a lot of the things that we already do, I feel like you could do them without meat, like spaghetti. You could have, just spaghetti with a sauce, or a sauce that's sort of augmented with vegetables or whatnot that are, I'm not going to have the culinary words, but I think we forget a lot of times that a lot of our protein doesn't have to come from meat. It can come from our good vegetables and dark leafy greens and that kind of thing. So I don't feel like this sample menu, certainly it's not even the old sample menu that's in the manual, it's never a mandated menu. Cooks and directors work with what they know works for them, but it's nice to have a suggestion and an outline for people to go by. And we felt like this menu didn't look that crazy. It didn't look, we didn't want to scare anyone by having them look at it and, find that there was a lot of, exotic foods that they're not familiar with. So I myself looked at, would look at this menu and probably there's something for me at every meal. Curious what you guys think.
Linda, could you go back one slide to the other day, please? Thanks.
When it said chili, would that be a meatless chili then?
That was my intention. I know that Bill and I have started making chili for ourselves and just put in more black beans and red beans and chickpeas sometimes. And we find that it's just as desirable as when you have ground beef in it, and probably just as much or maybe more protein. However, keep in mind in the resolution, it does say to transition to a more plant-based diet. So it wouldn't be like it was the law, if they had meals that had meat, they wouldn't be fired. No more camp directing or camp cooking for you because you used some ground beef. But I think there's lots of choices here.
Yeah. A lot of these items are very adaptable. I'll throw in a little background for you guys, for me, because I'm on board for a lot of this. I'm trying to do it at home as well. I I'm a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and that organization is trying to get physicians to move to counseling their patients in a matter of sticking to their pillars. And the number one pillar is a predominantly plant-based diet, followed by proper exercise for that particular patient, along with rejuvenative sleep, substance abuse awareness. So there's a lot of things, and good mental health status, good social connections. And so there's a lot of things that we can make and move by changing our diet that change our health, right? And so we've been experimenting a lot with this at home. I'm ready to move a little more forward than some of the other people in the family, but we've converted a lot of the spaghettis. You can make your own pasta sauce if you'd like. Add lentils in there because it gives it that texture of ground beef. The tacos, the same thing. You can use some of the plant-based meat options if you'd like, but one of the things we discussed last year at the national conference, the ACLM national conference, was, if you can't recognize it in a product, then you probably shouldn't be eating it, right? So that's part of the downside of some of the plant-based meat options, is that you really don't know everything that's really in it. But if you took something like your tempeh, which is like a fermented soy product, it's very easy to find and easy to get. We use that in our chili, along with when he was saying, throw in some garbanzo beans, add some zucchini or some cauliflower to it, and it actually is really, really good. And when you start adding some of these things in, you're giving the texture back, you're increasing the protein intake, you're increasing the fiber intake, which is actually better overall for health. So it's my perspective on this is going to be the true vegan stuff. It does get a little more difficult to do, especially when you're cooking large. Marching band camp every year down at Andrews University, which is a Seventh-day Adventist university, and their whole band, 280 of them, stayed in the dorms there, but they still had a plant-based menu all week for the students as they went through. The kids did fine. Very, very few of them really had problems with it. Those that did, I think they went in being a little skewed, but found out by the end of the week they didn't have a problem with it at all. So yeah, just take it a day at a time, make some small changes here and there, and you can do this for just about any of them. I don't know. I like it.
I think whenever you have a youth camp and you get a bunch of kids together, there are going to be picky kids regardless of what the menu is. And just for the record, we always tell our camp directors that, and all of the staff gets this, that, watch your campers and make sure they're eating enough to be, have enough energy to get through camp and be healthy. And so if we find a camper that's not eating, and there's various issues why they might not be, we try and figure out what they will eat, and we make sure that they have something to eat. It might be yogurt at every meal, or it might be who knows what, but I don't think we intend to leave anybody behind. My son-in-law, years ago, I asked a whole bunch of people about if they went to summer camp and what was their, what were their memories about summer camp? Did they like it? Didn't they like it? What was the best part? And my son-in-law, who went to a YMCA camp in Minnesota, that his whole family, his dad was the camp doctor, and his parents had gone through that camp. He went through that camp. They all love it. They all still get together for, reunions of past campers, but he hated it. He said he hated camp. And the reason he hated camp was because he was hungry all the time. Now, the interesting twist with that is that he was raised vegetarian, and he was at a camp that did not accommodate his eating lifestyle. So we have to think about that. When we have meat at every meal, or if a meal is centered around a meat, perhaps we're leaving other people out who don't like to eat meat or who don't eat meat already. So nobody's going to go hungry, I guess, is my ultimate point.
Yeah, at the Seventh-day Adventist camp that we stayed at for the Southeast Mission Center reunion, and John Jones from Ann Arbor was there also. There were a couple of people that were kind of grumbling on the first day last year because it was the first time they had ever been there, and they were just kind of accepting that that's the way it was going to be. But really throughout the weekend, a lot like this menu, honey, I'm on a Zoom meeting. A lot like this menu, it was just food that they offered us. There was nothing really strange. I mean, we still had eggs for breakfast. We had pancakes. We had waffles. We had some really good cheese quesadillas that none of us could figure out why they were so good. And then they had a really great salad bar that had good fruit choices and things like cottage cheese and hard-boiled eggs. And they had a lot of really great choices all throughout the weekend. And really after kind of, I think, the surprise of realizing that that's what they were going to be getting, there were no problems. I don't remember anybody going hungry. I brought my kids, they're 6 and 8, and they were totally fine all weekend. I mean, they would live on mac and cheese and quesadillas probably. But it was really great. And everybody wanted to return back there and do that experience again. So I don't think it was a deterrent for anybody at all. And honestly, the food was very good.
Are there any other questions or different aspects of the resolution you'd like to go further into?
When it comes to purchasing locally sourced, if that's what they do you have avenues for that?
So we don't have specific vendors yet for that. Our typical sources right now are GFS stores and local, Meijer or grocery stores for smaller items. But because our camps don't operate really with enough quantity or length of time, we're not able to get large vendors to deliver to us anymore. So we're on more store-based account systems. So we're really open to any vendors out there. For example, Blue Water this year did source their meat from the local grocery store and found that to be a better source for them. Now that wasn't necessarily responsible or locally produced meat, but anywhere we could find that, we'd be open to that. And we do have freezer capacity at all the camps. That's one thing the directors have asked about is could we, for instance, buy a grass-fed organic half or whole of a cow or a certain amount of ground beef needed and disperse that. And that would certainly be a possibility if we could find that source and work out the logistics.
Yeah. So I've got a friend of mine who he raises grass-fed beef. He's starting to get out of it. But he was talking about some type of if he was going to get into the organic part, there was a co-op that he could sell to, and the co-op is where you would sell to as the producer. And then that co-op becomes the distributor to the local restaurants, and that's where the restaurants would have to purchase from is through that co-op. So they do exist. It's just a matter of finding them and tracking them down. And I know there's resources for it. So
I looked it up for local grass-fed beef in northern Michigan and found several, just a quick internet search. I don't know price-wise what that would be, but just a fun story to share with you. There's not this weekend, next weekend, there is a youth retreat at Park of the Pines. And it's an interesting retreat because it's all youth ages, like all of our junior high, senior high camp ages together. They did this last year as well. It was great. This year, so far, there's 35 kids already registered. And the theme is a Harry Potter type theme. I think for copyright reasons, they don't say Harry Potter, but they have a grand banquet and whatnot, and they decorate the rec hall. And Ron Fuller has a full-on Dumbledore costume. And last year, and he'll do it again this year, Ron purchased turkeys for the feast and, wanted to make a big production of Dumbledore carving the feast and handing it out. So Bill got a call from Ron, who Ron had been talking to the retreat director, and he wanted to know if Bill had any idea where there was locally sourced sustainable fresh turkeys for the retreat. So Bill made a call to the grocery store where he used to work, and they have a source where they get fresh turkeys from locally. And Ron was on his way to get enough turkey to feed 50 people who were going to be at the retreat. So they're going to eat well. But I thought it was great that, we haven't even talked about this resolution at a conference yet, but that camp director was willing to say, what do we got to do? Dig in and we'll get this right. So that's kind of cool.
The concern I do have with the buying and then freezing is Blue Water in particular has had such nightmare year with power. And I would not think it would, I think it's just a concern that I would have of not losing it because the power has gone out, and just making sure that each place either has the generator or whatever capacity so that it's not lost, because then it's completely pointless.
Yeah, and I think that is actually another reason for following plant-based diets, and the carbon component is that they don't require refrigeration in most cases for storing the, particularly whole food. Plant components can be fresh or canned and don't have to be frozen. And so we avoid that carbon cost in addition to the refrigerated shipping. This year we saved, and that was one reason they switched to the local sources to get fresh meat, not frozen. But even getting it the day before camp didn't work because the power went out the day before camp. So we do have backup possibilities there and at our other sites, but that's always a concern. And the less we have to source and store either in a cooler or a freezer, the better for emergencies.
Here an anecdote. Bob Worthington put together a short history of Park of the Pines at one point, and in that history he mentions that our first family camps, which we called, of course, reunions, were all vegetarian. And that was because we didn't have any facilities. We had a big tent that we raised for our auditorium for our gatherings, and everybody stayed in tents or whatever. Some brought by horse-drawn carriage even, and people brought there and prepared their own food. And because they were there for a week and they didn't have refrigeration or anything like that, they brought vegetables and they bought things that wouldn't spoil. So they were all vegetarians.
which for those of you familiar with what's known as the word of wisdom in Community of Christ tradition, is sort of based on that same principle, even 100 years before that. We have that reference in our selected scriptures. But essentially that counsel is still in Community of Christ Doctrinal Covenants, in that language. I'll read that passage from, it's now section 86, verse 2, A through C. And again, verily I say unto you, all wholesome herbs God hath ordained for the constitution, nature, and use of man, every herb in the season thereof, and every fruit in the season thereof, all these to be used with prudence and thanksgiving. Yea, flesh also of beasts and of the fowls of the air, I the Lord hath ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly. And it is pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter, or of cold or famine. And all grain is ordained for the use of man and of beasts, to be the staff of life, not only for man, but for the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven, and all wild animals that run or creep on the earth. And these hath God made for the use of man only in times of famine and excess hunger. So it's an interesting concept to go back almost 200 years and look at what was happening in that culture at the time, and lack of modern technology and refrigeration, and why that may have been wise counsel nutritionally and from a health perspective, to not be overeating meat and to be eating it in warmer times when probably diseases would then be easy to contract. But that still is with us. It's certainly something we don't necessarily think about much, and we don't follow other parts of that scripture on food guidance, but many of those ideas do line up with a lot of the concepts we are now finding about human health and moderation, and recognizing that the typical American diet is far out of line with human history and human practice around the globe. Well, does anyone have any thoughts or recommendation or feedback about the proposed resolution, or how it's stated, or what information you think should be shared to help people consider this? All right, well, I don't hear anything else or see any chats at this point, so I want to say thank you to everyone who's joined and shared. We encourage you to continue talking about this with other delegates and members in your area, congregation, throughout the Mission Center. Help to share the word. We're going to close tonight with a poll that will ask you to reflect on the session. And then we have a closing song that I'll play, again, from Community of Christ Sings. I'll play the Beyond the Walls choir version from YouTube. So I think, Linda, are you going to put up I need to do the poll now, maybe?
It looks like you'll have to do it. It's empty on my end. I think because you're the host now, you might have it.
All right, so you should be seeing the post-session survey. There are 3 questions this time. First, asking you what you thought of the presentation. Second, if your opinion has changed in any way. And then third, what is your level of support now, thinking about the resolution?
I think maybe you're gonna end up with, I mean, we've got a limited crowd here tonight, but I think you'll end up with a lot more discussion, come November. My wife wanted to be on tonight too. She'll be going to the conference or at least attending on Zoom. I'm not sure what she's decided yet. I won't be able to be there as I've got a continuing ed already scheduled. It's a 3 or 4 day event, which is a big one. But I'll be able to at least bring this information back to the delegates from our congregation. So at least they're armed with information and they can, hit their questions up through me. And I'll get them what they need to know. But I think that's going to be the best way for us to do it, since we've got I don't know, 4 or 5 different delegates or something like that.
I definitely think that we need to have more information for the delegates, because I think people would have, first off would say no way, but after they hear it and talk about it, and even the Doctrine and Covenants thing was impressive to me. So I think that we need to do a little bit of help. Otherwise, I think it'll be hard to pass if people don't understand and have some thought about it ahead of time. I'm sorry there isn't a lot more people here, because this is a way that you find out.
Yeah, thank you. And so we, again, intend that we have this recording that will now be available in the announcements. As I mentioned, the slides and our packet of information will go out in the reports. We will have our overall fall conference preparation session the week before. We usually get a good number of people attending that, so we can bring a lot of this information up again. But it will probably rely on word of mouth and leaders who are connected to filter this down to members and delegates ahead of time. So we appreciate all of you coming tonight and getting this initial dialogue out there. Hopefully others will see it when they view the recording, and then sharing it with any others who might be able to pass it on. Okay, well, I think the full results have been there for you to look at. Capture those. Try to share my screen and sound so we can end tonight with the hymn. It's Touch the Earth Lightly. It's number 137 in Community of Christ Sings. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Go in peace.
Thanks, Dan.